Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Bianca, and for the first 24 years of my life, I was involved in a high-demand church organization called the Potter's House, and I'm here to talk about it. This video will hopefully serve as an introduction to a series I'm going to be doing called My Personal Experiences Described by the Bite Model. The title is pretty self-explanatory, but I think that it's important that some background information is given so that those videos make sense without making them so long. 3 things I want to cover in this video: a little bit of background about the church I was involved in, a little bit of background about myself, and finally a little bit of background about what exactly the Bite model is and why I've chosen to use it for these videos. So if those are things that you are interested in learning more about, please stay tuned. Okay, a little bit of background about the Potter's House Christian Fellowship, as it is widely known. There are also a few churches that go by other names. I believe the Door is the second most common, and I want to say that there's a third, but I'm not sure. So just know, if you come across a church called the Potter's House and or the Door, they are likely one and the same. So the Potter's House was founded by Wayman Mitchell in 1970 in Prescott, Arizona. He branched off of the Foursquare church organization and started his own thing. The function of the church organization is to convert people to Christianity and then convince them to go somewhere and start a church so that they can also convert people and then send them out to start churches, and so on and so forth. If you're noticing somewhat of a triangular structure, I don't know what you're talking about. As far as denomination goes, when I was trained from my tiny little years, I was always taught to tell people, if they asked about the denomination of the church, to say that it was non-denominational. In my personal opinion today, that's not exactly true. They are definitely more Pentecostal leaning, and they push that being filled with the Holy Spirit, evidenced by speaking in tongues, very hard. They push that very hard. You're pressured from birth. As early as you can start understanding them, they're pressuring you to take that step kind of situation. Now, for purposes of this conversation, there are many people who have left and have called it a cult. I don't think that that's a helpful word or term, because it's so stigmatized, and especially, like, I want these videos to appeal to more than just the people who are not involved. I just don't think it's a helpful word. If someone had come to me when I was involved in it and said, "Hey, I think you're in a cult," even if they were well-meaning, I wouldn't have heard them. I may have listened to what they had to say and then gone on my merry way and said, "They don't know what they're talking about," and not thought about it again. So I think the term high demand religion is very apt. The expectation of a member of this church is very, very high. They expect you to give everything of your time, a lot of your money, and like just everything that you are as a person. They expect you to give that to the church. They say that you're giving it to God, but really they want you to give it to the church. Okay, just a little bit more about myself. Like I said, the first 24 years of my life. So my parents were already involved in this church before I was born. I was at church before I was old enough to probably even realize that I had fingers. So this church had always been a part of my existence. We went to church. That's what we did. That's what the main focus of our life was church. And I was okay with that. I was happy to do that. It granted me a sense of community and belonging, and as I got older, a sense of productivity and usefulness. So it was I never had that fight with my parents of, "I don't want to go to church, leave me home," kind of thing. I was happy to be there. So when I was about 10, my parents felt called to start a church in Idaho, and it was about an 8-hour drive from everything that I knew and loved. So we'll call it Congregation A is where I grew up until I was 10. Then we moved over to Congregation B, where my father was the pastor, and we were there for about 9 years. And then some things transpired, and we decided to move back to Congregation A when I was about 19 years old. And that's really where things began to take a turn. So, 19 years old, I moved back. I was more on my own. I wasn't living with my parents. I had my own car. I had a job. I really began my independent life from my parents and started to have to make my own decisions. And that's when I don't know if I should say 5 years. I would say about 2 to 3 years in, after that move, is where my faith crisis began. And it took me a long time. I am a long processor when it comes to emotional issues. So it took me, I'm willing to say it took me 2 to 3 years to really come to, like, from when I started to realize I was unhappy to I made the decision to leave. It was about 2 to 3 years. So I think it's important to mention some of the key players in my story. Obviously, there's me. There is a love interest that will come up later. And then, of course, there's my pastor and his wife. Now, I don't believe in giving him the dignity of that title. So from here on out, I will be calling him Dave, and we'll call her Deborah. Those are not their real names. Please do not try to figure out who it is. That's not the goal of these videos. So Dave and Deborah were my pastor and his wife. And that will be important as we talk about some of the more toxic interactions that I had with these two folks. And of course, my parents, my siblings, all that good stuff. All those people will come up as I work my way through the bite model. Sorry for whatever abrupt change just happened. I was attempting to edit the footage that I had, and I just didn't like it. So instead of redoing the whole video like my perfectionist self really wants to do, I'm just going to finish my final thoughts here and tack it on to the end of the video that you are already watching. Unnecessary explanation. Okay, so third and final point of this video, the bite model and why I decided to use it to make these videos. So the bite model was created by Steven Hassan. The full title of it is actually The Bite Model of Authoritarian Control. And then each of the letters in BITE stands for a certain type of control. So behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control. And then under each of those headings, there is like a list of, not examples, but like descriptions of different kinds of control that fit under each of those headings. So, I'm not exactly sure what's going to be before this, but just to make sure I cover everything. I found the bite model kind of on accident. I was watching a YouTube video and somebody mentioned it and its relation to cults. It took me a while to be ready to like actually confront that idea. And once I did, it was a big deal for me having to come to terms with the fact that I had given the first 24 years of my life to an organization that was actually hurting people, myself included. And yeah, it was really heavy. And once I got past that, the bite model actually became kind of a source of comfort for me, which sounds a little strange, but sometimes when I would like think back on my experiences, I would question whether or not they were that serious or wrong. And And then I would have these occasions where I would be drawn back to the bite model and I would read through it again, and it would just be such a good reminder for me that, like, no, what happened to me was abusive and wrong, and I have every right to feel exactly the way that I do. And so I kind of want to offer that to the world. That's why I've decided to make these videos. That's why I decided to start my channel here with the bite model. I feel like it's a really great jumping off point. It allows me to share kind of the whole scope of my story, but it also kind of gives me a little bit of a buffer emotionally. I can use these sort of clinical descriptions to talk about what I went through without having to be so emotionally invested that it takes all of my energy to just make a video, Speaking of which, my goal with this series is to make 10 to 15 minute videos where I pick one point from the bite model and talk about my personal experience that relates with that point. I think that will give me enough time to cover the subject appropriately and talk about some more important issues. And I think that covers everything that I wanted to say in this video. If you enjoyed your time here today and you'd like to learn more, you are interested in hearing more about my personal story, maybe you want to learn a little bit more about the Potter's House from me specifically, if you subscribe and you hit the little bell button, then you can get notified when I upload, because who knows when that's going to be. And if you like and comment, then it's more likely that other people will see this and potentially get out of a toxic, unhealthy situation, or maybe decide not to join a toxic, unhealthy situation. So anything like that really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. The more traction that these videos get, the better for this message, and it's just really important to me that more people know and understand what's going on behind these closed doors. That's all I got for you. Hope to see you in the next one.